Welcome to the GraphQL 2.0 panel discussion, Reimagining GraphQL. So we thought GraphQL is 10 years old now, and we thought at this such great milestone, we want to take the opportunity to do a thought experiment, which is essentially, okay, what if we got the chance to do it all over again? What are some of the choices we would definitely make differently to make our lives easier? And so this is mostly like a reflection. And then from this thought experiment of what we would do differently if we have a blank slate to start with, and then go from there, it will be a North Star for us to continue to iterate on the current GraphQL. So no, we're not proposing we're gonna kill the current one and start a 2.0, but this is a good exercise for us to help us understand how do we get to the ideal state from where we are. All right, I should have probably started with a little bit intro of myself. My name is Koei. I'm a software engineer at Meta working on the GraphQL server and client. And with me are three really amazing engineers who are from very, very different background, to be honest. So I'll start with Martin to give us a brief intro of yourself.
Yes, thank you, Koei. My name is Martin. I work at Apollo on Apollo Kotlin. I'm doing a lot of mobile stuff. I've been doing mobile stuff for a very long time. A lot of Kotlin and a little bit of Swift.
Very nice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Benji. I'm an open source maintainer, community funded, so I do a lot of interesting projects, and then also a member of the GraphQL Technical Steering Committee.
My name is Curtis. I'm a software engineer at Meta. I've been working on GraphQL, mostly mobile, for about 6 years now.
That's awesome. So for the structure of this panel, we're going to start with several deep dive questions. Then we're going to have a little bit of rapid fire because we realize there are just so many things. And I heard some people wants to ask some questions at the end. We'll try to leave 5 minutes for Q&A, and if you have any questions, we'll try to answer them as well. All right, so to start with was our first deep dive question. So I went back to the spec, and the first thing that we kind of defined that's uniquely GraphQL is section 2.2 about document. And so I want to give the first question to Benji, who probably spoiler alerted a lot of the things earlier. But yeah, so what would you have done differently for GraphQL document?
I love the GraphQL document. It's great. I don't actually remember what my issues with it were.
Do you want it to be, I'm hinting, you want to add an adjective in front of the document that started with T, and that's maybe sound a little bit like ist.
If you saw the keynote, you may realize that I'm a big fan of trusted documents. I think one of the main issues that we may have made a mistake with the original GraphQL is not really dictating how people should make those requests. And we've got a very open HTTP request framework. And actually, we still do not have a specification for how to do GraphQL over HTTP. We have the draft of one, but it's not been ratified yet, and it's 10 years. But there's two major use cases for GraphQL. You can split it into two camps. One camp is people who want to expose GraphQL to the world to be consumed, like the GitHub API, we want to expose all of our data through GraphQL. And the other is we want to use it to serve our own apps and our mobile apps. And that's really where Facebook created it. That's what it was created to serve. And that doesn't want other people writing arbitrary queries that can be infinitely deep and cause your servers to grind to a halt. We don't want that. So really, we should have had an allow list from the start, and trusted documents is one way to achieve that.
All right. And then for our audience purposes, maybe a quick, brief summary of what trusted document is. I know you had an amazing talk last year, but just for the people who are not.
Absolutely. So when you send a GraphQL query to the server at the moment, there's a good chance that you just write the whole GraphQL query and you send it as part of a JSON payload to the server. Since that's a fixed document, instead of sending the whole thing, we can just send a hash of it, an identifier for it, and then we can store that ahead of time. There's a pattern that you may know of called automatic persisted queries. That allows you to do that on the fly, but that doesn't act as a query allow list, right? It allows any query and it just optimizes the network request over time. So what we want to do instead is make it so that at build time, when your application is ready to release, when you're about to push your website out live, you go over it, you extract all of the queries that you're using, you hash them all, you have a little lookup that says this hash means this query, and then the client just needs to send the hash to the server. The server looks up the hash, sees what the query is, and it can execute it. And anyone else who wants to send arbitrary GraphQL, they just get ignored because they haven't sent something that the server understands.
That's amazing. So apart from the security benefits, what are some other benefits of trusted documents?
Should I?
Yes.
No, I was going to say this fixes everything, like a lot of the issues people have with GraphQL. Security, you just said it, but also caching, like you can cache using a get URL or something like this. Telemetry, observability, because now you have a simple URL with your document inside of it. So no, really, it's my go-to answer for everyone that has gripes with GraphQL is just use trusted documents. Do we have trusted document stickers here?
We might have the cards, but I'm not on me.
Just use trusted documents, and it basically turns your GraphQL API into REST, so you have like best of both worlds. And yeah, we should definitely be more opinionated and more vocal about this. Sorry.
And one last thing to add to that. Trusted documents is essentially a name that is clear, but really we're talking about persisted queries, not automatic persisted queries, but the concept of having a list of queries ahead of time. And this was created by Facebook not to solve the security problem. It was created to solve the mobile network issue, to reduce the number of packets being sent over the network. So it was started for other reasons and happens to be really, really good for security. So yeah, it has a lot of other benefits.
Yeah, amazing. So hopefully one of the takeaway, starting with the document, is trusted documents. If you are using GraphQL as your first-party API, that's the thing that we would highly, highly recommend. And we hope one day we'll make that into part of the spec. All right, in the interest of time, so unless Curtis, you have something to add for, okay, all right. In the interest of time, I'd like to change the topic a little bit. So we just talked about document, which is operation. Let's talk about types in GraphQL. Well, GraphQL is a strongly typed language, and so one of the problems with the types that we offer in GraphQL is people have repeatedly asking for identity type. It's not exactly ID, but the ability to uniquely identify an object in our GraphQL system. So I'm going to start with Curtis on this one, since you didn't get to talk last time. What's your thought about identity type or identity concept in the world of GraphQL?
So at Meta, we have a lot of a pretty big schema, a lot of shared objects, a lot of things that we need to fetch over and over again throughout the app. And actually, we need to keep these things consistent in our app. We want them to, when we refetch things a lot, we update them a lot, we need them to look and be up to date wherever you are in the app. And so actually this concept of identity is really important for us, being able to identify, oh, this object is user number 4 versus user number 5, and we can update them. Having some sort of specification for doing this. I know in Jordan's speech earlier, he talked about the global identification schema. But I think even having a stronger definition in that, something that's, per type, something, ID4 for a cat is different than ID4 for a dog. The ideas around fetchability. I need to be able to refetch this for things like pagination, etc. These types of concepts, I think, should be. If I could start, I would love to have had these things as first-class concepts.
All right, Martin and Benji, anything else to add?
For anyone who has ever looked up an ID in a database and then accidentally queried that record from the wrong table, you'll relate to the fact that having the actual type name or something like that integrated into the ID, having it be globally unique so that you can't make those join mistakes is indeed really important.
Yep. No.
All right. Okay. So identity type is one of the things that we want to talk about. Now let's talk about some higher level of. I'm thinking about category theory, and here I'm going to throw out polymorphism for us. So there are several ideas that in the communities that we have been like talking about that's related to the polymorphism, one-off types, records types. So I want to give the room to you all to talk about that ideas.
You want to start?
We have one of them.
Well,
Well, yes.
as of like last week, I forget what day it was. Thanks, Lee. We have merged one-of, which means we now have input polymorphism, which is really great. Now, one-of actually works in a different way than what you might expect if you're familiar with interfaces and unions, because rather than being just it's this type or this type or this type or this type, it's tagged. It's a tagged union. What that means is you can include the same type multiple times if you need to. So, for example, you might want to look up a user by their username or by their email address, and both of those are strings. So it's not string or string, it's username, which is a string, or email, which is a string. And actually, this could have been an interesting thing to have put on the output side of GraphQL. We already have union, but union is only a union of object types. You can't add scalars to it and things like that. That we don't have a polymorphic form of scalars on output. And there are some situations where that would be useful. So I think if we were to start again, we'd probably just get rid of union entirely and replace it with one-of.
Raise of hand. How are people feeling about unions in this room? Okay, I see 2 thumbs down. Anyone else strong opinions about unions?
I have so many opinions.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, we're going to give a talk on Wednesday about migrating Instagram. And one of the things we're talking about there is actually like, how do we want to represent the schema? And we're explicitly not doing a union. We chose not to do a union and instead doing an interface for a lot of our heterogeneous types. Because interfaces are extensible, you can add stuff to it over time. Unions, it's much more difficult to go and use them over time. I also have complaints about inputs, but maybe I'll get back to that.
No, I mean I just wanted to say unions are like interfaces with no fields, so like this is something that has been bugging me forever. But I agree about input things and optionality. Is that where we're going? Input, optionality, nullability, and stuff like this. Nullability in GraphQL is a huge topic, and when it comes to input, especially, we kind of coalesced optionality and nullability, which makes the whole thing very hard to understand. And we can talk about output nullability later. That's, again, something else. But when it comes to input, you have variables with default values, and then you have fields that can also have input values. And in some cases, you may pass a value, but sometimes not. I mean, the whole thing is I have to deep dive every time, and it's very, very difficult to understand. Is that what you wanted to talk about?
No, but I also care about that a lot.
Just so that everybody understand the problem that we're facing, I'm going to give a concrete example. It's where you have an input. Let's say it's a nullable int. But somehow the server engineer decided the default value for that one should be 42. It becomes, so when you receive, essentially the problem is we don't, on the client side, or let's say on the server, when you're seeing that the client gives you a null, you don't know if the client didn't pass it. Then the behavior should be, well, if you didn't pass it, it should be 42. Or if the client explicitly passed the null. We don't know. So I think it's an undefined behavior as of this moment. Our server decided to always give it 42. But yeah, so essentially that's the problem that we're talking about.
And this actually hints at a deeper issue, which is that we actually have 2 concepts. We have the concept of null, and we have the concept of not provided. And some servers don't differentiate between those, do they?
I will say, I think this, lack of specification around this makes it really easy for us to misimplement our servers and our clients on how we do optionality. Maybe controversial. I think we should remove all defaults. Just like, I think all the there's like 3 layers of defaults in GraphQL. I think all of them should be gone. You know, query defaults, I think don't reuse your queries. Just why bother having a default? Schema defaults, documentation, encoded in the implementation. I don't know, maybe a hot take.
Wow, we'll have some time for audience feedback to those. So, all right. So coming back to, I think we have 2 potential points we can come back to. We can come back to polymorphism in the output types. If sounds like you wanna go there.
Oh, okay. No, the other thing I was gonna say about inputs was that inputs don't like. I think best practices for GraphQL is that you should have like mutations or root fields that are per use case. So instead of having something that does multiple things, you should have something that does one action only. And so actually that makes it very difficult to share things like inputs. There's no such thing as an input interface or input union or anything like that. A canonical example for meta is if you like and unlike something. We share like 90% of the same things, but like we have to define 2 totally different things. You have to fork all of both your client and server code to handle that. And it's actually kind of annoying to do.
And with input polymorphism, we could potentially have a more unified and shared code base.
Maybe.
That's a hope. All right. Okay. So going back to polymorphism, want to talk about, touch on a little bit of output type polymorphism and what are some of the use cases for it, potentially? Connections?
I think we're good. I mean, our generics. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a very good one. Yeah, we have this relay connection spec that is really good. But every time you want to add a new paginated list, you need to define a new connection, and it's a lot of boilerplate. And I'm writing a compiler that takes GraphQL in and outputs Kotlin, and Kotlin has generics. But now we have all these different classes, and I mean, you cannot do any kind of common code there. So yeah, generics would be really good. And one other, and I'll finish with that, one other use case possible would be like errors. Like right now we have, every field can be an error, but we could do like Rust, for an example, and have like error types or result types that you do this small bracket, and this opens a lot of possibilities. So yeah, yay for generics.
On the other hand of things, generics are complex. No one wants to deal with generics. It's really, really complex for us to deal with. So we do need to solve this problem, though. Connections are like such a common pattern. And treating every connection as if it's a whole new invention each time. Your user connection, this is a new thing. And your posts connection, no, nothing like that one. It's this whole new thing, complex. So trying to think of different use cases for generics in GraphQL, we've not really come up with very many that are actually very broad. And mostly it comes down to connections and maybe like mutation payloads, that kind of thing. So I think maybe baking something like this into the specification, if we were to do a 2.0, would make sense and relieve some of this stress without making the GraphQL language too complicated. But different opinions?
I think you guys covered it.
So maybe one of the things we're curious from the audience is, so connection is one of the really good examples where like generics in the output would be useful. What are some other use cases that you might know? If you know, please come to us, and we want to learn. We definitely want to learn from there and see where we go. So, all right. In the interest of time, I want to switch us to the last branch of the deep dive, which is execution. So we talked about we talked about documents, we talked about types in GraphQL, and finally we want to talk about the execution behaviors. So the thing that I'm going to come with is, I think everybody agrees like how GraphQL does error handling today kind of sucks. I want to start with Martin actually on this one of like maybe help us understand a little bit of why this is like not easy to use and what potential ways that we can change the behavior.
Yeah, so this is the one big thing I would do completely different. I mean, I didn't participate in the initial release of GraphQL, but I wish the initial people would have done differently is nullability and how we handle errors. So right now, when you have an error, you make your type nullable because the error is going to be coalesced to null. I mean, it will be output as null, and then you will have a matching error in the error array. But then that means that, well, you merge two concepts, right? You have errors on one side, and you have nullability, which is more of a product concern, like can your field be null? Yes, it can be null for valid reasons because your object doesn't have a title or whatever. And so I'm doing Kotlin all the time, and in Kotlin you have everything is non-null by default. And in GraphQL, everything is null by default because you want you want to be able to have an error at every field. And so now we have like every time I talk to someone doing Android or iOS, they're like, "Why is GraphQL nullable and nullable by default?" And I have to explain all of this. But we cannot really change it now because it would mean we change all the documents, all the documentation, and so on. So what we are looking into, and I'm going to give you the mic after, is change the error behavior. So we would just keep the current types, like non-null with a bang and nullable without a bang, except we remove this error bubbling behavior. And you should all go see Benji's talk tomorrow. What time? 10:45.
So the title is Fixing GraphQL Biggest Mistake in 512 bytes.
So this is the one. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we think about when we build a schema, right, we're modeling our business domain. And if you've got business domain errors like this username is invalid or something like that, it makes sense to tie those into the schema. But also, we live in a modern ecosystem which is layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And any one of those layers can fail for any reason. And those aren't really business domain errors. There's like, database connection dropped, or, this data didn't validate, or this service is down right now for maintenance. And those things shouldn't be baked into our schema. And what we've done is by tying in the possibility of these things erroring, we've made, well, this might error, or, well, in future, maybe I'll break that out into a microservice and maybe it'll error then. So I'm not really sure when I'll tell you what, I'll just leave it nullable and then it will always be fine. And what that's done is it's put a lot of stress on the front-end engineers to actually have to then do all the null checks all over the place, which is a pain. And I think the main issue here is that we've impacted on the business domain modeling that our schema does with concepts of errors. And really, they don't belong there. So yeah, if we can avoid that, and if you want to know how, come to my talk tomorrow, then yeah, we should.
All right, Curtis?
I'll just add that our schema is 99% nullable or something. It's crazy. Java was even worse than Kotlin. You had all the null checking with like, equals equals null or whatever. And I think it hides one of the, actually, in my opinion, one of the biggest superpowers of GraphQL is actually error handling on the server. Like adding the field level error handling actually improved a lot of reliability on, say, our apps. And so that actually, I don't feel like the experience should work against how well these systems should be, handling reliability.
Actually, I would say that the error handling in GraphQL is one of its superpowers. It's one of its differentiating features. It's fantastic, and it makes your application resilient. But actually surfacing those errors on the client side is actually a lot of faff, like going through and finding out what path applied to this null that you've got. It's a pain. So really, we need something better. But I think we can do it on the current GraphQL.
Yeah, we'll just continue iterate on. All right, so I want to end us with one last question, which is kind of jumping out of the box a bit. So what is the biggest change or what's the biggest missing part in the current way of how we define the GraphQL spec? And if there's any chance you want to add something, what would that be?
I have a strong opinion on this, and that is we are missing a huge section of the spec, and that is the client side of GraphQL. Like, we should be specifying that clients, for example, handle the errors that we were just discussing. We should be having them maybe understand standard pagination. We should be having them use trusted documents. There's lots of different things that we should be encouraging clients to do. Now, obviously, just using window.fetch is fine as well, and that's fine. But if you want to call yourself maybe a GraphQL client, that should have a minimum set of things that we encourage, including using fragments correctly. And for that, you want to see Jeanette's talk, which I think is about noonish.
And it's titled How to Use Fragments. They are not for reuse. All right, we're kind of on time, a little bit early because I think we have some of the audience questions. I think my key takeaways, there's definitely a lot of improvements that we want to do with GraphQL, and we all feel very passionately because of it. That's actually because we love GraphQL. We really believe that this is a good API. It's a strong query language that is super, super useful for all of our application, and we just want to improve it in the ways that it will serve us, continue to serve us even better. So I want to open up to the floor to give people any questions they want to ask our panelists. Anyone thoughts?
What would you do differently?
That would be a great question. What?
We asked the audience.
I'm kind of curious about the recommendations we saw this morning, which is say, hey, let's go way outside the box. I think mutations in particular is a place, when I describe GraphQL to people, say, hey, it's got a lot to say about how to read stuff, has zero to say about how to write stuff. Were you inspired by the call to action today to kind of start to fill in these other areas, or do you think, hey, we should stick to the knitting?
I'll take it. It's a really interesting question, especially if you come from REST, right? If you come from REST, you're used to the standard like put, post, delete verbs, and things like that. And, new ones, query, patch. So those are like the conventional way that you think about doing things. And those definitely have a place in our applications. Like CRUD is a common pattern that we see. But also, mutations shouldn't always necessarily model that. Like, checking out on a supermarket, is that a create? Is it an update? Is it a delete? Not really. It's its own thing. It's its own process. Often it's a chain of those things that are all wrapped up internally in a single mutation that you want to complete in a single transaction. You want it to all pass or all fail together. And GraphQL gives us the expressiveness to do that. That isn't to say that we shouldn't have standards for the ways that we do CRUD operations, especially because they're common across the whole ecosystem, and often people build GraphQL on top of existing layers. So those existing layers probably do these things, and having a standard way of modeling it will help our shared tooling. That said, I don't think that we should necessarily be encouraging CRUD for all use cases. Like, it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. And in addition to that, I think that there is a big issue that we have with mutations, which is that they have just one namespace. They all live at the top level. With queries, you can structure it with entry points, and then you drill down into what you need. But with mutations, every single mutation goes on that root mutation operation type. If you do mutations that aren't like that, you're not compliant with the GraphQL spec. You can do that, but it's not a GraphQL API anymore. It should be. I think we should introduce serial types, which give us more capability, but I'm not sure that that's 100% addressing your question, which relates to expanding for AI and things like that.
I have a slightly different take on the namespacing thing. I do think schemas by themselves the SDLs are extensible, so you could naturally, namespace them today. I think on mutations, the one thing that I kind of gripe with, I mentioned earlier about identity and consistency. Sabrina's going to give a talk later about, I think today or Wednesday, about data consistency. Deletions are actually really annoying. When you update something or when you insert something, you typically want to refetch your data to update, say, your UI. If that data is in a list. If it's adding something, you have to refetch your whole list. If you're deleting something, you have to refetch your whole list. It's really, really painful. Like, actually, at least that's how a lot of our clients today, like Relay or internally at Meta, how we handle updates. And so there's no natural verb for delete that would naturally allow us to do something like this in say, a list.
Also on delete, you've got soft delete as well, which is interesting. And another reason to build connections into the spec is maybe it will help us to manipulate these nodes with the identity type as well. So, yeah.
I'm good with mutations.
All right. And it's 11:15, so if we don't have any more questions, oh, yes.
Sorry, quick one. How do you feel about the ease of adoption for GraphQL? Like, I know a lot of like the biggest adopters of GraphQL are at this point, I don't want to say enterprise, bigger companies with bigger schemas and like bigger things that they need to model. And I've seen a lot of like doomerism around GraphQL for like tinier startups. They're like, I don't have time for this shit. Like when I grow up, maybe like I'll adopt it, but like for now, I'll just use REST. So with in an eventual 2.0, like what is there anything that you would do differently about ease of adoption?
I think trusted document is a good one. From my experience, ease of adoption is really good on the front-end side of things. Like you ask any mobile or front-end engineers are going to love GraphQL. Like they have good documentation, they have codegen. The DevX is just awesome. On the backend side, it's a bit more complicated because you open the door to security issues, arbitrary complex queries, and all this kind of fun stuff. So this is where trusted documents solve a lot of those issues. In addition to that, I think we could do a better job at explaining how versioning works. Like we have this concept that GraphQL has no versioning. Like you have fields and you evolve the fields, and it's a lot more granular, which is good. It's a good thing. But in practice, when you have a backend that evolves over many years, you always end up with something that you cannot remove because you have an old mobile app that relies on it. So you end up with different names, and you have this whole observability problem. How do you know when you can remove? And right now we're just saying there's no versioning, and it's easy, but we do not really provide guidance there. So I think trusted documents, better guidance on how to evolve your schema, and better recommendation would help a lot on the backend side of things, because the front end is.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I think one of the interesting challenges with GraphQL is it seems so simple at first. You get that first experience of GraphQL in like a graphical, let's say. You type the thing in, you get the JSON back, you add another thing, you add an argument, you're like, I get this, I know GraphQL, done. And then you go and build. And you don't go and read the documentation because like it's so obvious, right? And actually it turns out actually there's some really important stuff in the documentation, like use trusted documents, like fragments are for co-location rather than for just big reusable God fragments. Like it's a whole thing. Also, on the point of like deprecation, Facebook have done pretty good at like maintaining most of your fields, right? How long does it take you to load graphical these days?
It's actually okay now. We have some people who've like worked on it internally, but if you open the Document Explorer, the Schema Explorer, it takes quite a while, maybe 10 plus seconds. Maybe to your question, actually, I was thinking about what you're saying about like, for big companies versus small companies. For big companies like Meta, I mentioned earlier, we have like certain types that constantly evolve and update over time. It's called GraphQL. If you have a graph of data that's interconnected, you can easily compose your queries and create new ones out of an existing schema, right? That's kind of the superpower. If you have a small company where you don't have these interconnected types, you don't have, you're not really composing queries ever, you're creating entirely new things every single time. And maybe you don't care about rapid development with versioning and all those. I would say maybe like we could probably do a good job kind of telling when is the right time to be using. Actually, like if you have a if you're always creating new things for everything. I actually think you should pick the right tools for the job. And then I'll go back to say I still love GraphQL, and I would pick it for anything. So, you know, a little hard to directly answer that question.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, I think we can wrap up here. Thank you, everyone. Please give a round of applause for our amazing panelists, and thank you so much.